Hi guys, I know a lot of you have been enjoying the Cobra Kai series that was originally a YouTube original and has recently moved to Netflix. And today we're going to go over how you can create a sort of poster or an image that borrows a little bit from the Cobra Kai imagery to help promote your school, just a little bit of fun that you can create some of these. And we're going to use all free tools to make this, so you'll be able to create these without paying anything. So if we look at PhotoP, this is one I've created earlier, just a little bit of a demo to see how we're gonna create this. But let's have a look at the elements that make up this poster. We've got the building in the background. We've got somebody doing a kick here in silhouette. We've got the sort of sunburst effect and two people in profile, and then we've got the swoosh and the text here. So the images, the photos, if you can take some of photos that are a bit like this, or if you can pull some from your library, hopefully you guys will have a picture of the outside of your building, and maybe a picture of some of your trainers or yourselves in profile, and a silhouette of somebody doing a kick. It doesn't have to be a silhouette. We're going to show you how to create this, but if you've got a picture of somebody doing a kick, then things will go a bit smoother. So I'm going to get a new window up and start from scratch here. So the first thing I'm going to use is this website called PhotoP. And PhotoP is a lot like Photoshop. The look and feel of it is just like Photoshop, but it's a free web tool that you can use. So if you're familiar with Photoshop, this will make sense to you. If not, don't worry, I'm going to guide you through step by step of how to use this, and you'll be able to use some of the techniques. You can see it's ad supported here, so there are some ads on the right hand side. But the good thing about this is it doesn't rely on any processing really on your machine, because it's just a web app. So if you have an underpowered machine, you can still use this. So like I said, there's a few elements to the Cobra Kai imagery. Let's start with the building. So I'm just going to search for nest management. Hopefully you'll have a picture of the outside of your building. If I click see outside, then we've got a picture of the nest building here, which I know a lot of you have visited. I'm going to take a quick screen grab of this. Got the coffee van that comes around, or it did in simpler times, on the photo here. So I've taken a screen grab, and let's create a new project here. So I would like this to be 1280 by 720, a standard HD image. So if you click on screen, you can see here on social they've got the correct images for Facebook covers and Instagram stories, etc. But I want this to be 1280 by 720. So click create, and then I'm going to paste the image I just got here. Now I want to resize this so it's the correct dimensions. Now a point when you're doing any resizing in PhotoP or in Photoshop, if you just resize normally, then you can resize it to anything and the aspect ratio goes a bit funny. But if you want to keep your length and width consistent, hold down shift when you are resizing, and it will keep everything consistent there. There we go. And also, I personally like to have these selected. So auto select, that means when I click on a layer, it selects it automatically without me having to select the layer manually here. And transform controls, I like to be able to see the transform controls so I can make it bigger or smaller or whatever. So there we go, that's the background. That's going to be our sort of base. And if we look, the next thing we're going to need is sort of this starburst effect. So I'm going to go to a site called Pixabay. And we've recommended this site before. These are images that you can use completely royalty free. Another one that I use quite often is called Unsplash, and they're a bit more arty, but you can find some good stock imagery here. So let's go to Pixabay, and I want to search for sunburst. You can see these are all free to use. These are all the kind of images that we can use. So let's select. I think this one's probably going to be the best to use. Maybe we should use this one with the white. I don't know. Let's download this. You see here, these are sponsored images, so these are paid for images that you'd have to pay for here. That's one of the ways that this site makes its money and remains free. It asks for donations, and it also links to paid stock imagery sites. So if you can't find quite what you're looking for, maybe you'll be willing to pay for it, and you can go to Shutterstock or iStock Photos. But we're going to use the free ones here. So we've just downloaded this image. Let's drag this onto the screen here, and resize it so it fits the screen. Great. Now, if you've not used Photoshop before, you might not be familiar with the concept of layers, but every image that we're going to create, you start with a background layer, which is just white, then we add the first image layer, and every visual element we add really is going to have its own layer. One of the good things you can do is you can change the way this image displays and interacts with the layer underneath it. So at the moment this is set to normal, but you see there's a drop down here. You can do loads of different things with this: darken, multiply, color burn, linear burn, darker color. So let's go down the options here and see if we can find one that looks good. Overlay is pretty good. Hard light, that looks okay as well. Obviously none of those are really worth it. So let's go to see a hard light. You can change the kind of fill, how opaque the image is as well with this slider. So I can crank that up a little bit, crank it down a little bit to get what I like. Is hard light the white light one to use, or so we use overlay? I personally think that too much of the image is showing through when we use overlay. And it needs to be, I think, a little bit abstract to be faithful to the Cobra Kai image there. So yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm going to keep that like that. Now you see on the Cobra Kai image, they have this big sun here. Now we can do something similar if you want. Let's create a yellow. What I did here is I just click this this color selector down here, and then we can choose what color we want to use for our next layer. So let's get a kind of reddish orange here, maybe a bit more, a bit brighter. Click OK. I'll create a new layer by going to this button down here, this sort of square with a fold up. That'll create as a new layer. And then if I select the brush here, the brush tool, this allows me to draw anything I want on my new layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the size sort of quite big, so that the brush looks like that. And then I'm going to reduce the hardness, which makes, I'll show you what that does. That makes the edges a little bit more blend in a little bit more to the background. So I'm not really happy with that yellow. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reselect the color picker here, and if I select any color in the background here, it will select the color, it will pick the color that I've selected. So I want it to be the same yellow as I'm using for the background. So let's get that yellow there. Let's see how that looks. It's a bit better, isn't it? So I need to make the size a bit bigger. There you go. Now I can click a couple of times here to sort of bring up the lightness, but I think I click that twice, maybe a third time. That looks good. That looks more in line with the Cobra Kai. They have a much brighter sun and clearer red and yellow divide. And if you find stock images that do that, you can you can have it a bit more faithful. If we wanted to, we could bring a bit more of a white in here rather than the yellow. And if you're not happy with the way that blends, you can change how opaque it is and change the blending again here. There's a few different options. Play around with this until you're happy with the way it looks. I think that looks pretty good, so we're going to keep it like that. So if I go back onto Pixabay, I'm going to search for martial arts kick. So we've actually got a few silhouettes here if we wanted to use them. But let's assume that you've got an actual photo. If I karate kick. That's because we're searching in illustrations. Let's go back. Oops. There we go. So let's get one of I'm looking really for a person that's a bit more realistic. If you don't find one on Unsplash, if you don't find one on Pixabay, let's move to Unsplash and see if we can find one here. Right, this is a good one. This is a sort of picture that you might have of yourself or one of your students. So I'm going to download this. Again, it's all free, okay, for commercial use. That's the beauty of this site. And I'm going to use another free site called remove.bg. And this is a background remover site that I am the biggest fan of. I recommend this all the time. So I'm just going to drag the image we've just downloaded onto the site. Now you can see these are some of the images that I got previously. And it's removed the background for me. So if I hit download, that's downloaded this image with the removed background. And go back to PhotoP and drag that image on there. So there we go. We've got our kick. I'm going to put that in the middle. So we're starting to look a little bit more like the Cobra Kai image. But that is a bit too bright. It's not really a silhouette. So one of the things we could do, let's make sure we've got the right layer selected. I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, and then I'm going to go to, let's go to Brightness and Contrast. I'm going to turn the contrast right up, so the blacks are very black and the whites are very white. And then I've turned the brightness down, so it's more of a silhouette. You can go quite far with that, but I think that is probably about right. Are we happy with the size? Oops. Happy with the size of that? The image is coming back as I'm adjusting the size, but if we, there we go. This layer is the adjustment layer that we've just created. So I'm happy with that. I think that's a good silhouette. We could bring it down even more. What we could do is right click on the image, go on blending options, and then we could have a color overlay of completely black, and then just bring that down a little bit. You see, that's how it is originally, and we can just add a little bit of black to that, so it's even more of a silhouette. Let's just add a little bit of extra black to it. So that's very clearly a silhouette. There we go, that's great. So we're looking good. Now the next thing to do is we need one of these sort of profile photos of somebody. So you might have seen before, I was looking at some of the pictures from our client conference, trying to find one that's easy to cut out. Now Bal, quite a photogenic guy, let's use the one of Bal here, I'm sure he won't mind. I'm going to drag that onto the same background remover tool. You see it scanning that, and immediately has removed the background. I'll download it and drag that on here. Now that it's dragged on, it is there, but it's at the very bottom. So these layers work as you'd expect them to. The ones at the bottom is covered by the background. So let's bring that all the way back up to the top. There we go. And I'll resize that slightly, so it's more in line with what we want. There we go. Now what I'm going to do next is I want to edit, I want to create a new layer that kind of blends it in with the background. You see on the Cobra Kai image, it's kind of this light orange to the dark, as if the sun was reflecting off their faces. So how do we achieve that effect? What I'm going to do, now I think this is a bit of a cheat, but this is always how I do it. See the magic wand here. Now these are the tools that we can use down the side here. If I hover over this, this is the object selection. So I could just select Bal as an object. Oh, that's not worked. What I usually do is if you right click on the on any option, on any of the tools here, it gives you some other options. What I like to do is I use the magic wand, which basically selects it selects anything that is similar. So if we've got a blank background, it will select the entire black background. If I were to go on this sunburst, for example, and use the magic wand, it would, see, it selects what is kind of similar. But I want to select just Bal. So if I use the magic wand to select the area around Bal, then I can right click on the image, click inverse, and I've just selected Bal. I've just selected this image. So I'm going to create a new layer just down here, click new layer. And what do we want it to do? We kind of want it to go from a brighter image, a brighter yellow, to a darker red, black sort of thing. So let's select those two colours here. So I want it to be from this sort of brightish yellow, and then this is a secondary colour here. I want it down to a kind of, select this red and make it a bit darker. looks good. And what we want to do is select this gradient tool here, the gradient tool. And what I'm going to do is, now up here, these are the different gradients that you can have. The default is the two colours that we've selected here, but there are loads of different options here. You can have one colour that fades into transparent, and then you can have these sort of standard selections here, rainbow colours. These are kind of old school effects, but they've been knocking around in Photoshop forever, and they kept them in PhotoP as well. But I want the default. I want the two colours that I've selected here, the yellow to the sort of dark red. So let's drag that across so that the gradient is gradual, and then we've got a nice sort of yellow to red here on this layer. But I don't obviously want Bal to be completely greyed out, so I'm going to put that as maybe overlay. And there we go. I'm going to turn this down a little bit as well, because I think it was probably a bit too much there. So there we go. You can see that kind of looks like the light is shining on Bal down to a darker there. Actually, I think maybe this should be a bit even darker than that. So let's keep the selection, make it a little bit darker. That's a bit better, isn't it? Okay, now it goes really dark on the outsides here, but if you've got images that are appropriate, you can select any colours that you want and have it, you know, a bit more to the extreme side, or make the image larger, or however you choose to do that. So what do we have next? We have the kind of swoosh effect here. So let's go back on to Pixabay. And what do we want? We want a colour swoosh. Or swish. Let's see if they know what I'm talking about. Oops, can't spell colour obviously. Another trick that we could do is I want it red, don't we? See if I put some red swoosh. There we go. Let's find one we're happy with. Okay, that looks good. So it's a paintbrush stroke. So this is a trick that you can do. If you kind of know vaguely what you're looking for, Google it on Google image search, have a look to see which one is closely fitted and see what they are called. So I'm going to put brushstroke. That's more like what we're looking for, isn't it? So let's have a look. On Unsplash or Pixabay. See, these are the ones that you have to pay for, which I'm not. I don't want to have the paid for one. Bushstroke, PNG. If you search for PNG, it tends to give you ones with transparent backgrounds. Now this is the kind of thing we want. What we can do is, if we go onto Tools, and then Usage Rights, we can select the kind of select it so it's only free ones that we're finding. So these are on Pixabay, so these should be the correct kind of style. These look pretty good. Let's use one of these. That pink one is kind of closest to what we want, so I'm going to download that. And I'm going to drag it into a new window here. If you just drag it to this top bar, be in a new window. So I think this pink one is closest to what we are looking for. Don't worry about the colour at the moment. I'm going to cut that out and paste it into here. Edit the size a bit, and then I'm going to do the same thing that we did before when we edit the way this image looks. So if I right click on the layer that we've just pasted in, blending options, I want to change the color, so we put color overlay, and I want the color to be red, and we want it all the way up. So I want that to be a bit of a darker red, I think. There we go. That's more like it. That looks good. Now you see the boundary box here, the transform tools. If you click directly on it, that's how you resize it. But if you hover just next to it, it's the same as on Word when you're rotating things. We can rotate that slightly. So I want this to say Nest Management in kind of a Cobra Kai type font. So what I found is if you Google Cobra Kai font, the very first result says that there's a free font called Deadstock that looks a little bit like it, and you don't even have to, you can see I've already been on the site, you don't even have to download it. If I want to call this Joe School, you can just type it into this box here, click generate, and it will make the font, it will make it for me. So I can right click this, save image as, and download it. So I just right click the image that it's generated for me, and then I can drag this on to the Pixabay window. Again, it's gone to the bottom layer, so I need to just drag this up. Oops. Make it a bit bigger, rotate it slightly. Don't ask me why it says Joe's School and then there's a picture of Bal and a random stranger here. This is just to illustrate how to make it. So I want the font to be white, so we're going to do the exact same thing as we did to the red swoosh paintbrush stroke. I'm going to go on to color overlay and then change that to white, slightly off white maybe. And there you go, we're away. So I'm happy with the way that looks. What I can do is export as PNG, save, and that will download. If you want to, you can save as a PSD, which is a Photoshop file. You can save it as a PSD, so you have the backup and you can come back to it later, because obviously this is a web app, this won't save it to the cloud or anything anywhere. But I could post that to my Facebook, I could post that as sort of as part of an advertisement. You can create a few different styles. I mean, if you wanted it more to look more like this poster, then again you just need to break down the elements. We've got a school with kind of a gradient red to yellow back to red again, so you can create that with the gradient tool. The big sun, you can use that with the brush that we showed you earlier, that had the softness, the hardness of the brush brought down to create this kind of gradient effect. The font we've just found, and the two silhouettes. And if you play around with this, you'll be able to create something very similar to this. But what we've done today is create something similar to the YouTube posters that they used for the thumbnails for the images. So there you go. That is how roughly to create a Cobra Kai style image that you can use at your school. If you've got any questions, just let me know.